And I've got an amazingly incredible guest that I'm excited to have on right now. His name is Samuel Sanders, and he's the author of Your Next Big Idea: Improve Your Creativity and Problem Solving. And I'm so excited to have Sam on here because as someone who loves ideas, myself, I love to be able to connect with people who've also value ideas, because there are a lot of people out there who like don't value their own ideas, and like when they hear an idea, they disregard it. But from even the simplest idea, or even a bad idea, can come some amazing things. And Sam does some great things, talks about some great things inside this book, as well as we also have an exercise that, as a listener, you get an opportunity to also work along with us and play along with this. So it's a very interactive, this book, as well as this podcast is going to be interactive too. So stay tuned. And Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. Hey, it's totally great to have you. And by the way, you've won some awards with this book already. Can you tell us about those?
Yeah, so for whoever's familiar with the book publishing process, you go and you put your book out for reviews. And we already got a Blue Ink Review Notable Book Award, which is given to about the top 5 to 10% of books in their respective genre. And so I got a star review, and it's getting a lot of positive press so far. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, this is an absolutely beautifully designed book too. I am very impressed. And with that, so one thing that people probably will ever think whenever they're looking at a book or looking at a book cover is like, who is the author? What has he done? And I know you've done some great things as an entrepreneur, developing businesses and everything. Can you tell us a little bit about that, about some of the great publications that have like featured you?
Yeah. So basically, my career is split into a couple of different categories, I call it. I started my career working for like an Inc. 5000 fastest growing company. And there I was able to do like HR and like hiring, marketing, finance, like financing for projects. But one of the most important things I did was like I was selected to be on the R&D team. So that's when I really got to see like how, innovation happens at these fast growing companies. After I did that, I left and tried to start my own company. And it was called Wondershirt. I had a fantastic partner, Michael Shaw. And we worked together. We built like business plan, marketing, a supply chain for that product. And what it was like advanced performance clothing. So like it would compete with Nike or Under Armour using like some really high tech clothing. At its peak, we had about 5 different countries' athletes training in our clothing for the 2016 Olympics. So that was really exciting. Um, but it's no longer in business today. And so after like Wondershirt was completed, I went and I worked for the big corporate America. I worked for Fortune Future 50, Fortune 500, that corporate life that I feel like everybody's got to get. And I did things like really like specific like proposal writing or business requirements or QA work, but I also was part of like some very high level stuff, like looking at business development from like a really big corporate level, and as well as like creating new programs to help new hires come on. And so that kind of gave me the look at like how innovation is done at like the large corporate level, the very fast growing level, and then also like the entrepreneurial level itself. So after I left that, I started a company which I'm working on now, Herd LLC, which is a software program that connects governments to local citizens to help bridge the disconnects. Basically, it will save governments time because they get a lot of emails and they don't have a lot of staff typically to answer all of those emails. And it'll work to help citizens get their voice more effectively heard. And so while I was working on that, I started working on the book, Your Next Big Idea, which is, I think, the reason I'm here. And it just kind of came to me that like I kind of have these unique backgrounds, like the innovation in small business, the entrepreneurial look at things, and then like the corporate innovation. And they all look at like ideation and innovation slightly differently. And so I tried to put that together into like an all-in-one concept that anyone could pick up and take a read.
Yeah, that's amazing that you've had some great opportunities like that because, when I think as like a regular person, someone who hasn't been in like R&D or like environments where ideas are like incredibly valuable, so for someone who hasn't been in that type of environment, they don't, it's tough to know how much the value of an idea is, like, from like good or bad. So you have had some great experiences in a wide variety of those types of environments. And you mentioned that different places have different, like, I guess you would call them philosophies or approaches to working with ideas. So can you share a little bit about, what your personal, I guess, thoughts around ideas are? I guess you call it a philosophy or approach to ideas or ideation.
Yeah. So when I look at like ideas, I I feel like it's sometimes considered so abstract, and again, and it's honestly pretty frustrating because like people will just be like, oh, I can't think of this, I'm just not creative, and like will just give up on themselves in that sense, when really like we don't teach how to like come up with ideas. When we talk about like big businesses like Apple or Amazon that are really successful, we're always looking at the business itself, but we're never talking about like the garage where it was started, what trials and tribulations they had to face. um, so that's the biggest kind of disconnect in the education system around like, creativity. With ideas, you're really looking like, if you're trying to find like a new idea for a new product, or within a corporation trying to make something more efficient, you're basically coming down to three questions. So it's, what problems am I noticing, what wants do people have, and what needs do people have. And so what that means is all like good ideas that are successful hatch from problems. And normally like we face problems and we're just like, wow, this is really annoying, but each problem is really a potential opportunity to solve. So think about the first person who invented like the umbrella. Like they were outside in the rain and they're like, I really hate getting wet. So like, let me create something so that I don't get wet. And that invention has been around forever. So problems that you're facing, when you take a look at them and try and identify them and go to solve them, that's where a lot of the ideas come from. The other one's needs and wants. It's more like people who say like, I need something but they can't have it. That's a pretty strong indication that there's a potential for an idea there. And somebody who says like, I want something, I want this, it's also a pretty strong indication. And so those combinations of questions, like what are the problems I'm seeing, what are the needs that people have, what are the wants that people have, that's where you're really going to find your ideas.
Yeah, and can you expand into? So you mentioned needs, and you said something interesting. It was they have a need for it, but they can't have it. Can you explain that? Because usually, people think of n- uh, wants as something that they can't have, but needs, basically they have to have it, like food. So can you expand on that? Like maybe uh, explain what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I look at needs, I split them into two categories. So there's like functional needs. That's like, I need air, I need food. Like if something like that happens and there's, that's an emergency. But there's also like auxiliary needs. We're kind of conditioned as humans to like have things that make us comfortable and that we want to make us comfortable. And we'll do it like over and over in repeated patterns to the point where something feels so strongly that it is like a need for that person. Let me see if I can give you examples. So say like actually a really good example would be, a lot of people take a glass of water to put by the bed side for them while they sleep at night, just to make sure that like if they're thirsty they have that water. If someone's been doing that for 30 years and you take that away from them, like that's going to cause this real like a real irk. Like they're going to feel like, I need this, I've been doing this. And so that I qualify more as a need, because it's so ingrained in their process, in their routine, that it's like they feel like they need it, even though the other person might not necessarily need it. For them it's a need. So if you can find something that a lot of people need, like an auxiliary need, that also can lead to a really good, idea or potential business around that.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. And so, by the way, did you just come up with that example just now, or was that?
Yeah, it's just like
That
on the
was
spot
awesome. Oh,
here.
that was awesome. All right, cool. So that's a really interesting idea. Finding ways so that people who need water by the bed to keep it by the bed in like an effective way. Anyways, all right. So that's really interesting that you brought down that you were able to separate needs into two separate categories as opposed to just needs and wants, because at the end of the day, people need certain things to go about their day, and sometimes it's not always universal. And with that, all right, so some great stuff here already and learning some great things. Now, here's another thing is this: there's sometimes a gap, like when you're in R&D. I imagine, I haven't worked in R&D, so you could definitely clarify these things, but I imagine that if you're in R&D, or even a creative like group where you're bouncing ideas off of each other, you're throwing out ideas and it's a big brainstorm. So what would you say can happen? And there's usually a lot of good ideas, but what would you say happens to the good ideas that, aren't used? Or, what do you do with those? Do you just let them, disappear and never be heard of again? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So it depends on whether we're talking like in a corporation or like as an individual. Corporations have a lot more rules, especially like if we came up with a really great idea at like, the Fortune 500 company, like we're not going to go sharing that with the world. The nice thing about like corporations like that have that kind of like oomph behind them, they've been around for so long, is they could shelve an idea for 30 years and like it come back to it, like it'll be okay, and just re-innovate it. So the first thing you should always do is never get rid of those ideas. At least write them down, save them somewhere. And so, from a corporate perspective, you can do a couple of things. You can take those ideas and shelve them if you're like a company that has that kind of stability. You can take those ideas, and if you don't think it necessarily makes sense for your company, you can partner or license. There are a lot of other options to pursue the ideas as well. But more importantly, like as an individual, when you're coming up with ideas, I think the most important thing to do, and this is kind of counterintuitive, is to share the ideas. And a lot of people have this fear around, if I share my ideas, like maybe someone will steal it. But statistically, that's actually just really unlikely. Like there are only so many people that want to be entrepreneurs, and then so many people who want to be entrepreneurs with the same interest, then so many people who want to be entrepreneurs with the same interest that also like your idea, and then also have the skill set. Like it's very statistically unlikely, and it's really important from a marketing perspective to share those ideas. So first of all, as a corporation, you can send them out to someone else, partner with someone else, or shelve them. As an individual, definitely write them down and keep them, but also share them. And sometimes that'll re-spark different parts of the idea. You'll get feedback, and you all of a sudden it'll become, important to you. And I think as an individual, it's important to ask why you are shelving the idea. Like, what is stopping you from doing that idea? Is it I don't have the time or the resources? Really identifying that. And sometimes when you have a good sense of why I'm not doing an idea and you start sharing it, you might be able to push forward with it. Um, yeah. And if you have a great idea, you're really not interested in it, you can, same idea as a corporation, you could license it out to someone else or take like a percentage and have someone else can do it if it's a business idea. Yeah. So definitely save
Yeah,
it.
awesome. And you know, one thing that I got from your book was this idea that you never know when a good idea is going to come, or when a bad idea can help to transform into something good. And one thing I mentioned earlier was this idea of, a lot of people have a difficult time valuing their ideas. Like, I guess I imagine like when you're in a corporation, you can attach a number to it. You start to do the math, you start to see how many customers, got all sorts of teams defining a value for it. So for an individual, I remember you mentioning that you had this in your book, that you had a course on ideation, and that a lot of people weren't able to come up with ideas. So can you share a little bit about like what the value of an idea really is? Like, how do we even, like, most people just think, oh, I wrote this on a sheet of paper, what's it worth? $5, $100, who, like, can you share a little bit about your thoughts around that?
Yeah. So the value of an idea depends on the work that went into creating the idea. So if I'm just on, the street and I notice like a problem, or even better, like I notice someone else's problem, like I notice they're facing something and I can see that. And I think of something, that idea doesn't really have like a ton of value yet. It has some value because now I understand there are at least, if some people are facing this, it's like I have a sense that, I have this idea and there are a couple people that maybe could fit into a market that would potentially, go forward with the idea. If you go through the full ideation process, that's when ideas start to have value. So now it's like I've identified it like a problem, need, or want. I've erased kind of the stigmas I have with my solution. I've started working on like creating solutions. Sometimes that means like combining two different ideas to solve a problem into one, or taking different parts of different, brainstorming aspects to build your idea. And the big thing is if you start to feasibility check them, see, if there's really a market for it, if people want it, and then, share those ideas and get feedback. Once you've gone through all of that process, you're really like, it's not just the idea anymore. Now you have kind of this basics for market research, and you have more proof of concept. The more proof of concept you build around an idea, the more value it has. So if I share an idea that I'm like, hey, like I know 100,000 people in Cincinnati, Ohio are facing this problem, all of a sudden, like that has way more value than it's like, hey, I saw someone on the street in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they had this problem. So it depends on how much you put into the kind of whole ideation process and the market research with the idea.
Awesome. All right. And some great things there in this concept of, ideation being a process, and not just like just throwing things on a napkin or whatever. I mean, yeah, that's part of it, right? That would be the first step. But this whole idea of, expanding on it, looking at what resources are available, who and what sort of needs might fit, and then ultimately go into a proof of concept. So here's a thought is the is the and this might be getting like more philosophical in a way, but is the proof of concept, is that the idea, or is the idea of the proof of concept? Like, is that proof of concept just a physical thing? Like, what do you think on that?
Yeah. So I talk about like in my book, I talk about the different process on when you go through an idea. And it starts with what we talked about before, like identifying those problem, needs, and wants. Then it takes a look at like erasing some of your stigmas, or what you think about different either industry or thing you're working on, and then it goes into creating solutions. The definition of like an idea is like once you have something that is an idea, but to really make the idea, like we talked about before, have value, that's when like you're really going on. So I don't want to discredit the person like at the Starbucks writing on napkins that can really be incredibly creative. Like that person has a lot of value, but the like the ideas that they're creating can have more value the more you build the ideation process around it.
Oh, okay. Well, that's really interesting. So basically, what you're saying is, at the more you develop an idea, the more it starts to compound in terms of value for everybody in a way. Okay, very nice. All right, and also, so what would you say are some skills that you need, or like things that you can do to become an idea generator? Like if someone, just doesn't know how to get started, like they want to get into a job or business where they can just do ideas, like what would you recommend? Some skills to build?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'd say, go ahead, read the book. But no, I think like importantly, like, first of all, I just want to say, if you're someone out there that feels like they're not creative or not necessarily innovative, I would say that everyone has the potential to be creative and innovative, especially in their own way, because we all share unique backgrounds where we've had unique experiences. The person that like is trying to make a really big innovation, let's say for like the farming industry, is not going to be like the Ivy League school bigwig that came out with a PhD. It's going to be like the farmers that face those problems. So don't discredit yourself. Like if you don't necessarily feel like you're the smartest person in the room, or you feel like you have that ability. Everyone has that ability because they have that unique skill set. To get started, I would say like the most important thing would be to start asking questions. So you're really going to have to start challenging, kind of some of the norms we face. I talk about in business, I call it the stoplight rule. And basically it's, the concept I expand on in the book, but if you're in 2.5 to 5 years like doing something in a business, you're probably okay, but like you should maybe ask some questions around it. Once you're getting like over 5 years, I call that like the yellow light, and it's like you really should be asking questions about this, like why are we doing this? Like really start triggering like, is this still even efficient anymore? Like the rate that we innovate in our society has just gotten so fast. Like you really should start asking those kind of questions. And so for the person that comes in and it's just like, I want to improve my skills, the first thing I would say is like, look for those problems, look for those needs, look for those wants, ask questions, because honestly, it can be a little scary to ask questions, but once you start to do it more and more, it gets more comfortable. Taking it like beyond that step, like the next step of becoming a really good ideator is probably the feasibility check section. Because like now that you're starting to come up with solutions, it's like you're going to have, unless you're an entrepreneur, I mean, even if you are an entrepreneur, but if you're in a corporate setting, you're going to have to prove it. So it's like, oh, I have this idea, pitch it to my manager. They're like, eh. But if you can show the idea has value, that's really big, and that's going to help grow. So I would say ask questions and then work on trying to get that feasibility check in. And actually, I think it makes sense to just like talk about that a little bit more, because I think I've just glanced over it, but haven't gone really deep with it. So when you're feasibility checking, it's really important to ask like an additional 3 questions. From a business side, is there a market for this idea? Is there a market for this idea now? And do I have the resources to do it? And so the first, like, is there a market for this idea? Like, if you have an idea but nobody is really interested, that's not really going to have any value. It might be cool for you, and like you should still do it if you want to do it for yourself, but like it's not going to have any like business value. Does the market want it now is really interesting. So I think his name was and I have it somewhere in my notes here. Bill Gross, the founder of Idea Lab, he took a look and did a survey of about 200 startups, and he looked at funding, he looked at the team, the idea, the business model, and the timing, and did an evaluation of what led to most entrepreneurial success. And for 42% of the time, it's the timing. So it's like, it's really important that your market wants this idea, feels this problem now. And the good example of that is like in the biomedical industry. Like when you look at really new innovations, they're doing a lot of really cool, innovative stuff there. But if you're talking about, people adjusting their body per se, like that's something that as society, we're really not ready for. So it may be something that's really profitable in the future, but it's not going to be, valuable now because the market doesn't want it now. And then the last one is looking at resources. And that could be financial, that could be like intellectual, just like what do you need in order to make something, get off the ground. And if you don't have it, you can ask like, where can I get it? Can I train myself on it? Is there someone else that can join my team? Do I already know someone that that has this intellectual knowledge or resources or, financial backing? So That's really what you're looking at. Once you have those ideas from those problems, needs, and wants, you're looking at, okay, is this viable?
Fantastic. And I would have to say that like that whole concept of that timing is just huge, you know. So I just want to clarify when you were talking about like adding stuff to the body. Do you mean like wearables or like becoming a cyborg? Is that the type of stuff you're talking about? Like,
No, yeah. So like cyborg. Yeah. So I would say like wearables are obviously something that like society is very into now. Like, Fitbit's incredibly popular, Google Watch, Apple Watch, all of those, like wearables. There's a lot of really interesting stuff being done around diabetes with wearables. Um, I would say that would be like, that's right now, like we're comfortable with that. Then there's like the element of like putting, like let's say like a virtual key like in you, like that's
mm,
something that some companies are doing now, but it's like like not everybody's ready. That there's no way I would be able to sell my parents on that. They already don't like
right.
Facebook stalking, let alone like a company being inside of them. So yeah, I would say that. And a really good example of this is actually like Uber. um like when you think about it, before, like getting into a stranger's like car like would have been something that like was really kind of foreign, but it just kind of hit the
Yeah.
right timing, where people like needed cheaper rides and like wanted to have that availability, and like it was able to take off.
100%. And okay, fantastic. And okay, so you've gone over like basically some great things about how to like turn ideas into value and how to, become an ideator. And like even that farmer example was amazing of how like you don't have to be a MBA PhD, level person to come up with a great idea. Sometimes you just got to find the ideas that are right there, needing for problems that need to be solved right in front of you. So that is great. And, thank you for all of that, sharing all of that. And then one other thing you touched on in your book is this concept of stigmas. And, I'd love to hear more about that, from you yourself. What do you,
Yeah.
what are stigmas all about?
Okay. So I think like I mentioned before, we have like a lot of repeated patterns that we do. We follow sort of a status quo. When you're coming up with an idea and you really want it to be, this is almost taking it from like a good idea to like something that could be really innovative or like groundbreaking. You really need to examine stigmas. So in the book, I talk about different stigmas we have. So the first one, there are 8 of them, and so they're society standards, and that's like how people in society act. Like there are laws we have, which if you break are obviously really bad, but there are also certain like rules that we have as a society, like don't talk about religion or politics at family like gatherings or stuff like that, like different rules like that, that if you break, it's not necessarily bad per se, like maybe you're able to build a really constructive conversation. um and those can be really like if you're able to break those in a positive way, those can be really groundbreaking. But other stigmas people have, it's like the way they were raised. Like if you were grown up believing one thing and then all of a sudden like you have to believe another thing, that could be really challenging. That could be a stigma that you have. And like as well as like habits formed, like just that from doing things over and over, like the water glass that we talked about. And then also there's like additional like repeated actions on like a large scale level, so that would be like status quo type things. And also social influence is a really big one as well. So like say my like actually fitness influencers is a great like a great example of this. Like all of the fitness influencers are doing one thing, like I feel like I need to do that thing, like they know best, but all of a sudden like maybe that doesn't make sense as like the best thing. No, nothing against fitness influencers, often they're very on trend, but like the social influences, like the top companies are doing this way, so that's like how we're supposed to do that. And actually like in corporations, that's a big like we're everyone else is doing it this way, why would we change? It must work. Well, it might work, but you might be able to do it this way and make it work better. So when you're going and you're like looking at ideas, or I'm sorry, at problems, and then you go and you tackle some of these stigmas, like you really open up the creativity aspect of the ideation process, because now you're like, okay, like I've eliminated like these stigmas we have either as a company, as an individual, um, and like we can really start to create things that might break these in a really good way.
Yeah. And okay, so when it comes to stigmas, you did mention the clear stigmas of like following within the law, and of course, there's usually like universal like moral like codes, but when looking at the ideation process in terms of coming up with good ideas, I got the value of breaking stigmas, and you went through some examples like such as how corporations have the status quo and everything. So how do you know, like since you mentioned timing and everything, how do you know like when your idea is like too far out there, which I guess, sometimes you should just know, but like, how do you know how do you decide when either the timing is right or like, let's take an example. Um, an obvious brands like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Elon Musk, he decided to build a spaceship, right? Like, I'm sure his ideation process is much different, but like for the average person, like, how do you decide on things like that? Or how do you break a
Yeah,
stigma and still like, I guess, suit the needs of society?
yeah. So when it comes to like you think you have something really creative, but you're not sure like the timing is right for it, so the first thing you should do is feasibility, check it, like see if there are people that would want it now, take that, like we talked about before, take that marketing. But there are also like more extreme tasks that sometimes like people do. So I'll give a really good example here. So there's a new type of ACL surgery that's becoming, I think it's called bridge enhanced ACL surgery, although don't quote me on that. But it was in Boston, where they're doing a new type of ACL surgery. And that's something that's very ahead of like where we are now with ACL surgeries. And ACL is, such a serious injury. It's really important to try and make medical advances around that. What they did was they actually like created like this kind of YouTube video that spoke almost to like someone like me with no medical background, and really got like the popularity going to the point where it was like all of a sudden trending. And so they took someone like me who knows like very little about like the ACL process to all of a sudden being like, hey, like now I know about this really cool thing. So they sped up almost like the people to be ready. That's a really extreme example, and you need like a lot of financial backing to do that. But if you have an idea that you feel like is really in the future, that is, if you're a corporation, potentially an option you can throw around, but a very expensive and risky one. If you're an individual, like the one good thing you can do if an idea isn't ready is just like shelve it for now and like continue to get that feedback and like build on it. Like, and then you could be potentially, one of the first 5 into that market when it comes around. Yeah, and I think like recently, like when we look at like the crowdsourcing industry, like a couple years ago, like there are a lot of regulations around crowdsourcing. And so, people had a lot of ideas, and that was a really good example of people building for a long time. When we look at like the blockchain industry, like some of the different, digital currencies that are coming up, all different people are creating all different things. Yeah, so I think that as an individual, it makes sense to kind of like shelve it and wait for the market timing. As a corporation, you have that option, but it's very risky and very expensive. So, grain of salt.
Yeah. But what I thought was great about what you just mentioned about like this concept of the corporations is the idea that like, if you've got the money, it's ultimately, in a sense about changing, or I guess adapting the needs in a way, by teaching people what they could possibly have, what or needs or wants, but like, through that video, they basically, made it feasible for, everybody. And I felt that was a
Yeah, I
great
think
example.
with the like, and this is to the side, but with the medical industry, that's always really interesting because you always want to make sure you have like enough backing and research. But then once something is out there, like a lot of times it takes time for people to accept it. So it's really important. Obviously, they have the backing and the research, but then like once it's out there, then you can go and try and do something like that.
Yeah. All right. And but this is off top, or I guess not so much about the book, but I wanted to get your idea about this because Bill Gates just launched a book. I think it's How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And, he in the book, he talks about how to go from 50 billion tons of emissions every year to zero while also still helping, the poorest people in the world still thrive. And that requires a lot of infrastructure and everything. So obviously, something like that needs ideas. And I'm curious, how would you, just hypothetically approach a situation like if you were just sitting there and you're like, I'd like to send some ideas to Bill Gates about this. Like, what would be some of the first steps to tackle something that big,
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is like, if it were me, like I am not an expert on climate. So it's important to get like outsource, like a group and team of people that are experts. When you're looking at like tackling a project that's that massive, and like Bill Gates has both like the financial backing, the kindness of his heart to work on something like that, but then also like the resources and the team of people to do that. You're looking at a lot of outsourcing to people that are specialists. So for him, like to come across something like that, like Bill Gates knows a lot about, the climate, but he's not the top most expert in all of the different kind of like climate efficiency. So when you're looking at a really big problem like that, it's like, okay, instead of me solving the problem, let's break this into like 10,000 little problems. And then those little problems, let's take those to the people that face those little problems and then like get them to solve it. Then you're looking, so this is more like a leadership point of view. You're looking like high up, okay, like here's where we have how we say some carbon emissions here. Here's how we do it here. And then like build that high up picture all together. And then like he's able to write that book, which looks amazing. I have not got a chance to see it yet, but it's like trending everywhere. So yeah, so it's really like if you're looking at like breaking down something that's like really big like that, I would say find a team and work with other people that know what they're doing. But then I would also say like it's if you solve one of those little 10,000 problems, that's also a really big impact. And you can help build up to the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing what you just said because I have had the opportunity to read the first few chapters, and that's almost like basically what Bill Gates did. Is like he's like, yeah, I was reaching out to tons and tons of people, meeting all these people and experts, tell me about this stuff, and it got me, interested in like solving this problem and all that. So I think it's so cool that you share almost that exact strategy. Now I don't know how he exactly went about it initially. I think he got inspired into it, but similar process, and that's great thinking of if you want to solve a problem, don't go into like something you've never heard of and then just try to solve it yourself, but to bring people together. And that can be a great time saver too.
Yeah.
And also, yeah.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that one of the things that I feel like corporations like don't value in this sense is bringing in people who are totally not experts. And I know that like this is like it's slightly related, but basically like if I'm trying to solve a problem as a corporation and I bring in someone that doesn't really have any like knowledge around it, but who I think is like a smart individual, oftentimes that can provide a lot of value in the ideation process and creation process, because then they're coming in and they're trying to understand things. So they're asking questions, they're challenging some of those like stigmas you have, like, wait, why are we doing it like this? Like, what about this? And maybe a silly idea, but it's important to think about like why we do things that way, and they spark creation too. And so I think like with that, like, I mean, solving a problem like the climate crisis is such a huge process, but you need all different types of people from all different backgrounds working together on something like that.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, of you've got the experts, but there's also people that are great with, just ideation in general, and that they can apply that in many other areas, problem solving and whatever you want to call it. So wonderful. You've shared so many great things, Sam. So I want to thank you for being here. And with that, you did mention that you had an exercise for us. It did come out of your book, Exercise 30, and I was able to go through it. But for 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 the listener, can you share with us, like, walk us through this exercise that we can all do together, the three of us, or million of us, or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So just like touching back to give some background so that I can dive really deep here. the book itself, like one of the challenges I had when writing it is so many people learn in different ways. And it's really important to provide a way that everybody can kind of come along in the process. It's, like I read a lot of like business type books, and sometimes they're just like, this is what you should do. This is what I did. And this book is not like that. It's really more trying to take the person on the journey. And so that's where the exercises came in that we're about to do together. And so those were really important to me because they help, take the person that doesn't necessarily learn the best just by, going straight and listen, like reading, what someone did, and helps force them to go through, not force, but, takes them through the process of, these creative concepts themselves. So the worst, so this is called the worst company exercise. It's in the middle of the book. And it's a really funny exercise. Usually we can get some good laughs out of it, but how it works is you can do it with a friend, or you can try and do it by yourself. You think of some really bad business ideas. This could be something like a mattress filled with bees nests, or it could be something like a pencil sharpener that doesn't sharpen. And then you either give those ideas to someone else, or you take them on yourself and you try and spin it and pitch it in a way that could be, something that's positive. So like if we were to go through an example, let's see if we can think of an idea. So let's say like glasses that make you see worse. Like that would be an absolutely horrible idea.
Yeah.
So like you would take 5 seconds, and like you could do this yourself if you're listening, and like think about like how you would take that. And it's like, okay, now it's my responsibility to bring that to market. Like, how would I do that? So as I'm thinking here, it's just like, okay, have you ever wanted to look like Clark Kent, feel like you're Superman the entire time? Feel what it's like to have all of those crazy ice vision, or the stuff he has. Like, try these glasses that'll make you feel like a superhero. And it could be something that goes into your Halloween store, or like something like that. So taking ideas like that. So we can try and do one more here. And so like a candle that never lights. So like if you took like 5 seconds here and be like, wow, what a great prank toy we have here. And I actually feel like these might exist, but like we have a great prank toy here. Put it on the birthday cake for your friends and family. Watch them try and like, light it for them, and see the results. So stuff like that.
I remember my girlfriend has a candle, and it's actually like an actual light inside, but I didn't realize that. So I melted half of it because I tried to light it on fire. So you just made me think of that. But let me so I'm gonna try this exercise. A flower pot that you have to wear as a hat.
A flower pot you have to wear as a hat.
Okay. I'm trying to. It's difficult to break the stigmas, because when I think of a flower pot, I keep thinking, what's the logical ways that this could happen? But a flower pot. Okay, well, there you go. So if you're looking for the latest trend and it's springtime, one of the great things to have is a flower. And you can also prepare for Valentine's Day and put flowers on top of your head as a flower pot. Keep the water up there. It keeps you cool during the summers too. So it'll last you through spring and summer. Oh, cool. All right. That's fun.
Yeah. And then also, maybe in the winter time, it protects you from hail, like you don't want to get hailed on. So there you go.
All right.
Yeah. So, I think that's a really great exercise. Just kind of just like, we're so often in the same routine over and over and over again, and we don't really get the time to just, be creative anymore as adults. So I think that's really great to get people going. I think you did a great job.
Oh, thank you. And I definitely want to emphasize, like, this idea which you brought up about the stigmas is, when I was running through a bad idea, I was like, is it okay to come up with a bad idea? Like, I was trying to like figure out like what is a bad idea? Like, it's just tough to break that mold of like wanting to be right, I guess. But,
Yeah. It's sometimes even simple things like coloring outside the lines in a coloring book can drive people nuts. But like, it's important to, spread that kind of like, stigma breaking, exercises in your life. And we have in the book, there are a ton of different things like this to help you try and get into your, creative juices. And I think it's really important. Like as adults, we spend time, being creative, being ideators, and, trying to innovate.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And this book is absolutely amazing. I love the cover and all the designs in it. It feels like a fun adult book, right? Like going through these exercises, learning, but learning about big business, R&D, but also being practical for the individual, and at the same time having a lot of exercises. I'm the type of guy who will go online, and I feel like I'll go to a website, and they talk about like these mind quizzes or whatever, and I've feel like I've seen them all before online. But I actually went to your book, and I was like, whoa, I've never heard of this exercise. Whoa, this exercise is pretty cool. Whoa, hey, so that was a ton of fun. Definitely got my mind going. Definitely, for people that like that type of stuff, absolutely amazing. And if even if you're not, like, I got so much value out of this. And Sam, just wanted to get an idea. I did get a pre-release copy of this. Can you share more about, like, what's the best way to reach out to you if they want to connect about ideas? What's the best way to when to get your book and all of that?
Yeah. So if you're interested in the book, you can go to yournextbigideabook.com, like the title, Your Next Big Idea, and then book.com. And you can, there's like a shop page there where you can, get it from either your Amazon or Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore, bookshop, wherever you shop for books. And there's contact information on there. If you want to contact me, please do. Like, I love hearing from everyone. So that would probably be the best place to contact me. And if you're interested in pre-ordering, that'd be great. I would really appreciate that. And hopefully, like, we can spark some great ideas together.
All right, wonderful. And all of that will be in the description for this episode. So thank you so much for being on here, Sam, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, and thank you so much. This conversation was amazing.